Hello, it is Thursday, May 7th, and we just wanted to welcome you again to this weekly devotional. This past Tuesday, May 5th, was a historically significant day. May 5th, 2020 marked the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Holland from Nazi Germany by the Western Allies as part of World War II, of whom a large contingent was made up of Canadian soldiers. It was on May 5th, 1945, in the Dutch village of Wageningen, when a Canadian general accepted the surrender of the 25th German Army in the Netherlands. Only a couple days later, the entire German forces formally surrendered, and victory in Europe, or it's known as VA Day, was proclaimed on May 8th. For the Dutch liberation, there was a total of 3 Canadian infantry divisions and 2 Canadian armored divisions of over 150,000 Canadian soldiers who participated. And more than 7,600 Canadians died in the 9-month campaign to liberate the Netherlands. The love and gratitude amongst the Dutch for what the Canadian liberators did for them has been deeply felt ever since. To show their appreciation for all of Canada, the year after liberation, the Dutch sent tens of thousands of tulip bulbs to Ottawa, a tradition that continued each year and remains so to today. In 1991, Lena Van Dam, a Dutch woman, started a tradition at the Canadian War Cemetery in Holland of placing a candle at each Canadian grave on Christmas Eve. Local school children and citizens from nearby villages and towns join the tradition, and each year the commemoration is repeated. The love and gratitude for Canada runs deep because of what the Dutch were freed from and the human cost for their freedom. The Dutch were freed from more than 4 years under German military control. They were freed from forced labor, as every man 18 to 45 years old had to work in German factories. They were freed from economic starvation, as many of the food and other goods were taken out of Holland for the sake of Germany's economy. They were freed from human starvation. Over 20,000 people did die from starvation during the winter of 1944 and 1945, known as the Hunger Winter, some resorting to even eating tulip bulbs. They were freed from strict regulations on their movements. They were free from repression, especially the Jewish population. They were free from having to hear the German bombers roaring over their homes in the night sky. They were free from fear and tension, worry, grief, and terror that comes from war. And that's just a brief summary of what the liberation meant to the Dutch, which came at a great cost. As I mentioned, 7,600 Canadian soldiers lost their lives. When the liberation took place, there was an unimaginable outburst of emotions. After years filled with fear, despair, hunger, persecution, captivity, forced labor, imprisonment, and death, it all had come to an end. Claire Baum and her sister survived the war. This is her vivid recollection of that liberation day in the Dutch city of Rotterdam when she was still a small girl. In her memoir, she wrote, "On May 5th, 1945, we were liberated by the Canadian Army. We were so excited to see Canadian soldiers on their jeeps in Rotterdam. Our friends ran over to our house and screamed, 'The war is over! The war is over!' They were jumping up and down and hugging us. They said that they were going to ask the Canadians if they could sit on one of their Jeeps, and Tentanel let us go with them, knowing we were safe. After we came back, we told Tentanel that not only did we sit on a Jeep, but the soldiers had also given us chocolates and chewing gum while they took our picture. It was the most memorable and exciting day of our young lives. And when we looked up, we saw all kinds of planes, and out of the sky, packages were raining down. Each package contained food, and our first piece of bread in such a long time. It was so delicious. Tentanel called it manna from heaven. She said that it was a miracle. I came across another person's memory of that day. This person wrote, "As the Canadian tank came near, there was a big hush over all the people. And it was suddenly broken by a big scream, as if it was out of the earth. And the people climbed on the tank, and they were crying. And we were running with the tanks and jeeps all the way into the city." Just imagine that. As it was described, a big hush, broken by a big scream, as if it was out of the earth. All the pent-up emotion made it felt like the earth shook. What we celebrated on Tuesday was freedom. We celebrated the liberation, and we truly celebrate. Large celebrations were planned for in Holland, and 75 years later, and there were plans to have a celebration here in Drayton. Unfortunately, we're not able to have those celebrations. The liberation and the end of World War II, unfortunately, though, was not the end of the wars. We know there has been several since, and wars continue to be fought today. Our world is still subjected to hardship, to war, to disease, to deadly viruses, as we well know. Paul writes in his letter to the Romans that the entire earth is longing to be liberated from evil and death once and for all. That creation is waiting in eager expectation to be liberated from its bondage of decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. The freedom Christ has purchased on the cross with his blood is not only for all who trust and believe in him, but his finished work on the cross and resurrection has laid the foundation that will bring about a transformed world. For the Bible promises a new heaven and a new earth. No more war, no more suffering, no more disease and deadly viruses. God has promised to free, to liberate every square inch of our world. And when Christ returns, I think the universe, not just the earth, is going to reverberate with joy. That is our ultimate hope that is grounded in Jesus Christ, the hope of our world. As we commemorate and celebrate not only the liberation of the Dutch 75 years ago, but also all the many ways people experience newfound freedom, most especially the freedom found in Jesus Christ. For we know it's a foretaste of the great liberation that is to come. So come, Lord Jesus, come. The Lord bless you.